Welcome, adventurers, to another lore exploration as we dive into the enigmatic Idoneth Deepkin, one of the most mysterious classes or species that you can play in Age of Sigmar Soulbound. So if you are new to this series, first of all, welcome. I have a video about Fire Slayers as well. This is only part 2 of this series. And what we're going to do is talk about the lore of the Idoneth Deepkin as a whole, and then we're going to explore the 3 player classes that are available for you to play right now from Cubicle 7. And we're going to talk about what they each individually do within the roles of their own society, give you some idea for motivation, and then talk about all 3 of them in a sense of what do they actually bring to a party, right? What do Deepkin bring to the table in terms of abilities, skills, and things like that. And we're going to finish it off by reviewing a pre-generated character that was actually made by the folks over at Cubicle 7 just to get you started. One thing I do want to throw out there though, in the description down below, you will find a link to a Discord that is actually run by some terrific people, and essentially it's a soulbound Discord and it helps people find games and bindings and all these kinds of things, so go ahead and check it out. They're wonderful folks and very helpful. Now, just so you're not staring at my mug this entire time, I'm going to cut to a bunch of really fun, Idoneth Deepkin art to kind of get you in the mood as we talk through their lore and various archetypes. Elves in the Age of Sigmar universe are an extremely versatile race. They can look, feel, and act incredibly different from one another, whilst all still kind of being under that big umbrella of quote-unquote elf. Probably the most out there, so to speak, in terms of pushing the boundaries of traditional fantasy elves are the Idoneth Deepkin. Their story is one of tragedy, isolation, and ultimately hubris. And so let's get started. Far back in the Age of Myth, the twin elven gods of Tyrion and Teclis inherited a miraculous gift: souls. Specifically, elven souls to craft and shape into whatever they wanted, a chance to breathe life into their race and bring their children into the mortal realms. Now, I'm not going to touch too much on where the souls came from, as that goes a bit into the weeds, but understand that there are 4 characters, 4 elven, deity level characters: Tyrion, Teclis, Morathi, Malarian. Tyrion and Teclis are twins, I mentioned that earlier, and all elves of varying degrees of power and might basically had these souls to craft their followers out of. Teclis, the mage god, decided to try his hand at creation first. He wanted to create a magnificent and noble empire of scholars and wizards, regal in the extreme. I believe the youth of today would call it classy AF. Pretty much your classic Tolkien elves for, kind of pulled from a long forgotten age. But something wasn't quite right. And it didn't become obvious until a full population of these firstborn were already created. You see, there was a darkness in these souls. Likely they were probably damaged, being the first ones that were made, kind of like taken from the elven gods and forged into a new people. It was still an experimental process, and the darkness in their hearts couldn't quite be pinned down. Now, of course, they were still children of Teclis. He made them, right? They took to magic like a fish takes to water, so to speak, and they became sharp and powerful and very learned. But that darkness in them still remained. As the population tried to grow, again, he made an experimental new race, and they're trying to get, so to speak, their feet off the ground. It was revealed just how dire the situation was. You see, perhaps 1 in 100 births resulted in true, stable elves. The other 99 were born with a spirit or animus, like a soul essentially, that was not powerful enough to sustain life. So you have a real population problem if only 1 in 100 births can create an active member of society. And so Teclis looked at this and was disappointed. Now, he is a deity level character, his ways are different, and rather than seeing these creations as full people that he made, he looked upon them as a potter does with clay that has, cracked or fallen brittle. Teclis wanted to destroy these elves and basically start over. It's an experiment, the scratch round one, we'll try it again. These firstborn, the ones with stable souls anyway, saw what was coming, right? The writing was on the wall that he was disappointed, and they fled. Now, they needed to truly go somewhere they didn't think a god could find them, and so, using their resourcefulness and the powerful arcane magics that Teclis had taught them, they hid in the deepest, darkest depths of the sea. Now, I'm gonna yada yada just a tiny bit here because I want to move into what these firstborn eventually became, which is what we know as the Idoneth Deepkin. Elves that live underwater and use its environment, its creatures and flora to create a secure domain of their own, using a type of magic known as the Ether Sea. Essentially, it's a way to bridge the gap between air and water. If you are within a bubble or the area of effect of the Ether Sea, the world works a little bit different. It kind of bends reality a smidge. You can breathe normally, though the air is thick and humid and it kind of smells like seawater, but also undersea creatures can breathe it too. It's like you're both breathing your preferred environments. In addition to that, it messes with gravity in a sense that you feel like you are moving underwater. If as a kid you ever, went to the bottom of a swimming pool and tried walking or anything like that, that's exactly how it feels when you are trapped within the Ether Sea. It also means that fish can swim through the air as if they were in water. That's how you have flying, floating animals here. And with this advancement in magic, the elves can live underwater without fear of reprisal, and when they do come on land, they can take their powerful oceanic monsters up with them. Again, the animals will breathe and float along just as if they were underwater. But there's one thing left to discuss about the Deepkin as a species. See, running, hiding, and using magic to bridge the gap of your environment is really awesome, but it doesn't fix the original problem. The population problem. And this is where we get into the territory of why Deepkin as a whole are not fully trusted by others. Ultimately, this is a story of problem solvers, right? The deep sea elves quickly found a way to restore their race. You see, the problem with the 99 births isn't that their bodies aren't healthy or anything, it's that they lack a soul, some animating force. They're like a cup that has a hole in the bottom of it, and whatever soul they are imbued with at birth just kind of drains away. But if the 1% of the population that is fighting capable goes out and, say, steals a bunch of souls, well then those can be transferred into the 99 without them. These creatures are known as Nomarty. You can't play as one in Soulbound yet, but these are elves that are constantly in need of their souls being replenished, and this is achieved by raiding civilizations on land. The Deepkin take what they want, meaning your soul, and return with it to the dark depths and basically transplant it into the young. So even though, this Nomarty, this, for lack of a better word, it's just an elf underwater, has a mind of his own, he does take the souls of others. It's like putting a new battery in something. Now, that doesn't make them, chaotic or evil per se, but it's kind of the classic elven arrogance to be this pragmatic, right? I view myself as more valuable than you, I need souls, and so I'm just going to take what I need. And so, elf pirates from the deep that pop up and claim souls for their enclaves is kind of at the core what these guys are. The last thing lore-wise I want to touch on is their mounts, as just about any of the playable character archetypes can let you take one. This is a society or people that have really taken to the idea of, quote-unquote, working with the environment to the next level. They have beasts of burden for transport, eels and sharks that are used like aggressive cavalry, even titanic turtles that act as living war machines. It's all incredibly cool, and you even get to interact with that a bit in Soulbound. There's a wide variety of beasts and monsters out there within the realms, and so having one of those on your side is a fantastic ability to have. All of the playable options may have, equal reason to become soulbound as we kind of transition more into the archetypes, as the fear of their souls draining away, just like it does to the Nomarty, is a constant thing that's playing in the back of their minds. Okay, even the ones that, the 1% of their population who is born without any problems of their soul still have this fear, right? Because, you're constantly looking at the rest of your race, the people, the Nomarty who make up most of the race, and you're constantly thinking to yourself, there if not for the grace of God go I kind of a thing. It's this firm reminder that at any time, something might be very, very wrong with you or your society. Well, when an Idoneth Deepkin becomes soulbound, it ensures that this won't happen. Essentially, when you join a binding, you lock your soul in with others, and so you won't drain away. That fear is removed from you. Nomarty, to my understanding, can't be soulbound because their souls are already stolen. What are they binding to? It's kind of drifting away or pouring out. I'm not quite sure. But the playable characters we get here are the ones that are born with their souls intact. And they will gain strength, and they can live above ground and act as emissaries of their enclave and return with the souls of villains and monsters that they vanquished. And so that's my quick primer on the lore of the Idoneth Deepkin. And in Soulbound, you have the option to play as one of 3 archetypes, and all of them are part of, like I said, the 1% of the population that has a whole soul. If you want to learn more about the actual, the deeper, I guess you could say, lore sections of the Idoneth Deepkin, I do have an entire lore week that I made for them quite a while ago, and I'll put it in the description down below. They are a fascinating race with a tragic history, but ultimately this is the kind of information that you need to be able to start kind of addressing the hopes, fears, and that kind of stuff of your character. Now, what's interesting about these 3 archetypes is that, like I said, they are part of the 1% with their whole souls, and within Deepkin culture, those folks are treated as essentially nobility within their culture, right? Proud and powerful in equal measure. You wouldn't know, based on how arrogant they are, that they are one of, a very, very, very small percentage of their population that is actually hale and hearty. So let's talk about these 3 archetypes. First up is the Achelian Emissary. Without question, this is the warrior class of the Idoneth Deepkin. They ride to war in raids or leading them, and they defend the enclave or scout out the realms for souls that they can return with. And to be honest, that's about all there is, as far as their role within society. These are warriors and defenders and nobles first. Any other motivations is probably going to be based on political intrigue and personal, agendas and stuff like that you as a player character can come up with. These are often, young rulers that are out to prove themselves, or maybe they've been cut out of a family will, and so, or are just shamed in some way, and generally speaking, where they might run and go become soulbound because they want to prove themselves or have a life of action and things like that. Or they just feel the burning call for adventure and refuse to hide in the dark depths. Again, just because that's where they are doesn't mean that's where every Deepkin wants to be. Some of them want to come back to the surface. Whatever the reason, these are incredibly talented warriors, right? They have struck out amongst the realms, taking their Fangmora eel mounts. Again, you get to ride this super weaponized flying snake eel thing. It's quite terrifying. And they're able to project their own mini ether sea around them with the cloak that they wear. And that's actually something that took me way too stinking long to actually find out. I was like, oh, okay, so he has a Fangmora eel. What's projecting the ether sea? Do you have to bring another character to have that go? Nope, it's built into him. He can always ride around with his mount, and it is a devastating attack profile for that creature. So starting off, it's just a monster. Also, if you play Age of Sigmar, the actual tabletop miniatures wargame, these are some of the most aggressive units in the game. They just crush anything they touch. So, I don't know, I feel like it transferred into a role-playing game very, very well. Now, next up is the Ishiran Squire. And these characters are of vital importance within Deepkin society. Essentially, they have the ability to peer within a person and see the nature of their soul. And initially, this may start as deciding if a newborn is Nomarty, meaning their soul is corrupted or draining, or Achelian, they're a warrior class, their soul is hale and hearty, or Ishiran, meaning they are also have a full soul and they're more magic leaning. But it goes a bit further than just kind of assessing the nature of their own kin. It's the soul scryers that navigate the ocean depths and direct raiding parties to hunt their bounty, oftentimes singling out the most powerful and stout souls on the battlefield to their military leaders. So not only will I lead you to where the fight is, to where we can raid and steal souls without, any kind of real retaliation, but while there, they're going to pick out the best and the brightest, and we can use those to make better and better troops. They can see through almost impenetrable darkness, being able to see souls far away over great distance and through walls. Like they could just tell where their prey is. Now, as of late, they have taken on a secondary role as emissary of the Deepkin people, right? And that probably makes sense. They have a noble look to them. They know the reality of the Deepkin plight, but they don't have to share that with anybody. They just really have a deep understanding of what the problem is and how to use politics in order to find a solution. So yeah, why not send them out to, rub shoulders with others and try to be buddy-buddy with other factions? Because at this point, the Soul Scryer can, learn where villages are, enemies that can be harvested, and so on. And because they're able to sense and communicate over such distances, they can then relay that information back to their home enclave. So they kind of act as a representative, scout, spy, and powerful wielder of the Ether Sea that can navigate the oceans and darkness with ease. If you are looking for a traditional role-playing game equivalent, kind of think of him as a priest type. Yeah, he's not a fighter per se. All of his stuff revolves around soul power. It's kind of up there with that, but the aid he brings to the party is safe passage, witch sight, and the miracles of the Ether Sea. And lastly is the Ishiran Tidecaster, possibly my favorite of them. These are the mages and wizards that make the Deepkin way of life possible. They are the originators and propagators of the Ether Sea, that kind of phantasmal cloud that merges air and water, toying with gravity in the process. This is the class of wizards that first crafted this type of magic, and now they can wield it as a true force of nature, and also imbue that magic into powerful artifacts. Like we mentioned before, the Kellian Emissary has a cloak that allows him to basically take the Ether Sea with him so his eel doesn't just flop on the ground and flail around. Most Tidecasters will specialize their knowledge of the Ether Sea to some extent, identifying with different aspects of the endless oceans. It could be that they like the tranquility of the sea floor, and so their discipline, their magic, and their talents will be focused on kind of bringing things into a point of tranquility and silence. Or they could focus on the crushing pressure of its depths, and that'll be reflected in some of the spells they choose, or the piercing impact of waves crashing against a rocky shore. All of those things, there are spells in this game to let you represent. Many cities of order will call upon, aid from Deepkin and be disappointed when only a single Tidecaster is sent. But that disappointment quickly turns to horror when they see what happens when the Ether Sea is weaponized against somebody, right? This whole time we've been talking about it in the sense of a constructive purpose, merging environments so that animals can go from point A to point B and we can breathe underwater, kind of like a support spell type thing. But here's the thing. It is possible to weaponize this because you'll have enemies that are drowning in open air. There's nothing drowning them, but they are in fact unable to breathe. Beasts that get tamed and subdued. Blasts of arcane energy roll over the battlefield like a tidal wave. These characters are quite often terrifying to behold. And so with that being said, I want to ask the question, what do the Idoneth Deepkin bring to a party? Well, this is kind of a broad question because, quite frankly, it's very easy for some of them to point out, right? Obviously, with the Kellian Emissary, he brings war, right? He is a warrior class, but he's a different kind of warrior because I do think some of his best abilities are found in his mount, the Fangmora eel that he comes with. Now, the Fangmora eel can be killed in battle, and at which point the Emissary is still a great fighter. He has great stat lines for him and that kind of stuff, but he will have to retrain another one. So it's kind of it's a warrior with a little asterisk that's like, and my beast guy does a lot of the heavy lifting. Moving into something if you wanted a priest class, like I mentioned before, obviously I think the Soul Scryer is up there. This would be a character who typically has a lot more empathy for others, or at least is able to understand the motivations of those around him and manipulate them. Again, these are at the end of the day elves. They are very self-centered, very arrogant in their ways, and so him kind of being more of the politicking type thing where you're manipulating everyone around you is really important. And the Tidecaster is a straight wizard that is just absolutely baller when it comes to offensive spells. So you kind of have your warrior, priest, and wizard classes, but they're just kind of reskinned in new and unique ways. And I do say unique because I do think that using the eel as a primary weapon basically for the Kellyan Emissary is different than a standard, barbarian warrior when I say that. The Soul Squire has more narrative depth than a normal priest because it's not necessarily tied to a religion. They don't have a set religion. They know that their god exists and that he actively abandoned them. And so it's not like there's a whole church built around anything. It's just him using the world around him to their advantage. And then lastly, obviously the Tidecaster, who you want to talk about arrogance, they forged an empire underwater because they created a new kind of magic. All of these things are essentially toolboxes that you can bring to your party. I would say, to be honest with you, the two standouts for me are the Tidecaster, the wizard type, and then the Kellyan Emissary, the warrior type. The Soul Squire is a bit interesting because, there are a lot of classes in this game that use soul as a primary, that's your main stat. Like in my game, I'm playing as an Excelsior War Priest. But it's interesting because his motivations and that kind of stuff are probably the most open-ended. You have to do a lot of your own writing to figure out, okay, this Soul Squire is here for X reason, he joined for X reason, he needs to have this goal. Like it's a lot more of like you trying to come up with your own thing, whereas the roles for the other two I feel like are much more intuitive. And you can soup them up to the nth degree when it comes to what they specialize in, right? Offensive potential, different kinds of magic for the Tidecaster. You can have the Kellyan Emissary not use his Fangmora eel, just focus on him being really, really awesome and just use the Fangmora speed. Like there's different avenues that you can explore for just about every single one of these. Now what we're going to do here is transition over to talking about a pre-built character, which is a Tidecaster, I believe, from Cubicle 7 for you to start adventuring with. And here we are checking out that, and I was right, it is a Tidecaster. Name is Ishiran Siegler, and I like that quite a bit. Ishiran Tidecaster, it's an elf, obviously. Age, 80 years young, I'm going to say. She's not long-lived. Eyes are a weary gray, hair silver blue, 6'9", quite tall, 185 pounds, and arcane patterns on my back. Interesting. Okay, cool. So, as you can see, we went ahead here, and they actually modified this a little bit, if I'm not mistaken. Nope, never mind. I was thinking of something else. Basically, 1 body, 4 mind, and 2 soul. Mind's going to be important when it comes to spellcasting, as a lot of their stuff has to do with that. Now, we're going to talk about their skills that they have created. And again, I always go through this just because if you just want to pick up a character and get to going, this is a great way to do it. Heavy emphasis in Arcana, awareness, so they are very, very acutely aware. One of the things that I didn't mention quite before when it comes to a lore sense is that the Deepkin, when they are in the Ether Sea, they can like feel vibrations as if you were underwater and you're feeling the water vibrates. They can kind of detect things kind of crazily. So awareness is a great stat to pour into for that. They also have obviously channeling. I believe that's the one that she gets base, like your core skill that you get. They also went for intuition, lore, and reflexes. As you can see, they actually spent quite a bit here as far as their experience goes, buffing up channeling. They want this to be a good magic user, which I super respect. Natural awareness here at 3. Moving down here for goals. This is always a tricky thing. At least I'm finding it to be tricky for my character and my binding. We're all kind of struggling with the goals, but short term, find the worst mortal in Brightspear and claim their soul. So they want to do a little soul witch hunt, if you will, and then long-term, discover how to fix the souls of my kindred. And that's going to be an extremely long-term goal. Connections, Darok shared a secret with me. Don't have if your game master doesn't have a character by that name, don't worry about it too much. And for talents, I'm going to zoom in here a smidge. They have Elf, which means long-lived. You have 2 experience points to spend on any skill, meaning awareness. And so that's what they poured those into. They have 2 experience and they poured them into awareness, for 1 for training and 1 for focus. Spellcasting, the Deeps, that's kind of the name of their spell lore as they call it, and you get to pick 4 spells. So for, is it Imran? Yes, Imran. They have the Shape spell. You have learned to control and shape your most deadly spells to avoid your allies. When your spell targets a zone, you can choose a number of targets equal to your focus in channeling to be unaffected by that spell. That's incredible. That's really awesome, because essentially what you're saying is you can now dump tremendous amounts of damage through area of effect spells, but you don't have to hurt everyone in your party, especially if you have like 1 or 2 bruisers that run up and start punching people in the face. Other talents include Scholar. You spent years studying a particular area of lore and knowledge, such as history, biology, one of the sciences. Choose the focus of your study. You double the dice gained from training in lore for tests concerning the chosen subject. So this would be something I believe you would choose at the start of your character development. So I would probably choose, for example, like lore. That's kind of a thing that I would absolutely do. Unbind, you have learned to quickly unravel the winds of magic and can unbind spells before they take effect, and basically it gives you a chance to shut down magic coming at you. And Witch Sight, which is you are gifted the ability to see, quote unquote, the magical energy that permeates the realms. For some, this manifests as colored waves or motes of light in the air. Others perceive the thaumatological, my goodness, that was too much for me, energies of the realms as distinct frequencies or musical notes. Essentially, you get a perception of magic around you. I'm going to go down just a little bit here. As you might expect, terrible in combat, terrible at defense, but does, because they have a mind stat that is pretty great, have accuracy. So you can hurl things at your opponent a little bit better than other people. My guy, my Excelsior War Priest is just straight sad. He's poor at everything, and I think that's awesome. Got initiative 6, 1 armor. They just wear a light armor. They're just a wizard. Metal of 1, toughness 7. It's pretty generic. 4 wounds. That's pretty generic as well. And then we also have a staff, which doesn't add too much. Crushing is not super important. Again, they are a wizard, and so we're going to scroll down here. And starts with 200 drops. Oh, that's incredible. Look at that. And Elven Rune, meaning water. Okay, just listed out there. And then we have our spell list. Now, they got 1, 2, 3, 4 spells because they know the lore of the deeps. And they know, what is it, Arcane Blast, I think. Yes, it's Arcane Bolt and Mystic Shield. And then the other ones are ones chosen from the deep. They were kind of mixed together and it kind of confused my eyes for a second. And essentially they just picked, let's see here, we have Cloying Sea Mists, which is basically the air becomes really, really thick and hard to move through. Riptide is just a straight damage spell. Forgotten Memories, a lot of times when the Deepkin leave an area, they will actually cast a spell to make people forget that they were ever there, so they don't quite know what happened to their civilization. They're just a bunch of people missing, or their souls are gone. So that's kind of rad. And those are all kinds of stuff like that, where they use magic to really make their life possible. And so this is just a great example of that. What I would love to see is just your ideas for your character. This is available for free as a download from Cubicle 7, and I'll try to remember to leave a link in the description down below. So friends, that concludes my exploration of the 3 archetypes available currently, there's more to come I'm sure, of the Idoneth Deepkin. I'd love to hear your character, about them, their name, their motivations, why they became soulbound, and the adventures that they've been on. Go ahead and leave it in the comments down below, I'll respond to you there. Thank you all so much for watching and listening, and I'll catch you next time. Happy adventuring. Hey everybody, I hope you enjoyed that video. It was made possible by the folks over here to the left. These are my top supporters over here on YouTube and on Patreon that keep this channel going. If you'd like to learn more about how to become a supporter and get some cool things in the process, like exclusive pictures and interactions with me, and get your questions answered here on the channel, go ahead and click any of the links down below or the join button on the community page over on YouTube. Regardless of your choice, I wanted to thank you so much for joining me with this video, and I look forward to seeing you in my next one. Happy wargaming.